Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the High Stakes NASCAR Podcast, post-Phoenix edition. I'm your host, Mike Bachmann, alongside Zach Catanzareti. We went short track racing for the first time in 2024, Zach, the highly anticipated reveal of the new short track package. We got our first taste of that, but Christopher Bell dominates. Toyota dominates this race. Really impressive stuff coming out of that camp. We talked about, over the course of the first month, how we were a little bit of a learning experience with this new car for Toyota and Ford, for that matter. We got a great indication coming out of Phoenix at just where these manufacturers truly stack up next to Chevrolet, because I think it was a little bit of a tease from how dominant Chevrolet was at Las Vegas, even though there was some foreshadowing, I think, from those in the Chevy camp to really see that, wow, maybe the gap is a lot closer than we initially really thought, which we can kind of get into a little bit. But nonetheless, Christopher Bell punches his championship we're not quite there yet. Punches his playoff ticket. Not quite there yet. If Phoenix was any indication, these Toyotas are going to be mad fast in the championship four if they get there. But Christopher Bell punches his ticket. Toyota, the class of the field, and there really isn't much more you could say about that. So Zach, I'll welcome you in officially. How you doing? How was your weekend, and what'd you think of the race?
Doing well, man. Doing well. It was a fun weekend. I think, as you said, all the eyes were on what that race was going to be. Even leading into practice, like if you think we haven't had a bunch of practice this year, you think of Daytona and Atlanta, there's not a whole lot there. Daytona lost one of its practice sessions due to rain. There was none in Atlanta. Vegas, we finally got going, and now we finally got to see this new short track package with the changes that were made over the off season. A lot of drivers were fairly outspoken. They didn't really agree on what the car was going to be like in race trim and what it was like in what the deeper you get into the pack and the more cars you're behind, how does that really impact the car itself, and the tires with the tire wear, what that's going to be. And I think, Denny was on one side, Suarez, and then a few other guys are like, I really don't feel any difference. And the tough part with packages, I feel we often, as viewers, we don't necessarily notice the change, right? Like, we never see big changes where you're like, oh, I know, like I can visually tell the differences with how the competition is on a particular track. If we went into this race, or came out of this race rather, and they never told us there were any changes to the cars, I don't think we would go like, no, there was clearly some differences. It was very minute. Certainly wasn't worse. I'm on the side that I quite enjoyed the race. Phoenix is not one of my favorite tracks, but I believe last year's championship was the best championship race I've seen. I love that race. I love the different drivers who are up front, the comers and goers throughout the field. And this race was fairly similar. I feel like we always have battles to watch, whether they're mid-pack, guys having, certain issues and having to come back. And nobody dominated, which I love. 5 drivers led the same amount of laps. So it was always kind of a revolving door on who kind of nailed it at one point. And a part of me likes when it's difficult to pass. Like, this is one thing I hear people say in a negative way, like, oh, you can't pass. It sucked. I kind of like when it's harder to pass, because then you get longer battles, right? You get drivers who are stuck behind somebody. They start getting a little frustrated. They start experimenting on what they can do to get by. We see more aggressive battles because, as I said, it's in their head. They're trying to get by and they can't. And you get, moments like Ty Gibbs and Tyler Reddick. Now that happened early in the race, but Reddick was just on him, working him lap after lap, corner after corner. And when he finally got that position, I felt like I succeeded. Like I'm watching that and I'm like, oh, he did it. Like it felt like it was worth all that work. And Reddick had a great car. Gibbs had a great car. Then Hamlin, Truex, like, as you mentioned, every Toyota was up front outside of, maybe a couple. No, Bubba really didn't have the run that we expected from him. And I like races like that, where there's always battles to watch, especially up front. I don't like races where it's one guy and it's his race unless something significant happens. That just didn't seem like the case. I know statistically and just watching it, you can tell Bell had the superior car, but it wasn't a runaway. I feel like there was always something there to keep you on edge, and strategy came into play a little bit at the end. I know, Truex, it didn't work out for him, but overall I enjoyed the race. It's what you would expect from a flat track, especially a Phoenix. I think once we get to a Martinsville, that's particularly a track that needs a lot of work. I think that track with this car, even before, the Gen 6 car really struggled out at Martinsville those last couple years. Like Brad Keselowski led 460 laps that one year, and I think was it Truex who did the exact same thing. Like there were races where nobody could pass the leader, and it was very strange. So we'll see how this package kind of evolves throughout this next month, because as we mentioned before the show, this is basically all we have, through, got COTA and then 3 other short tracks. So we're going to learn a lot more. The teams are going to learn a lot more, and we'll see how it evolves, because it's not going to be the same now versus, 4 weeks from now. The teams are going to learn a lot and try to make it better.
Sure. Yeah. A couple of things to unpack there. Yeah, we do have a small sample size with this package. And personally, like, I appreciate your argument about, it's more, maybe there is something more we should appreciate about the ability or the ability or the lack thereof of passing and make it so easy, because you do get those longer drawn out battles, but like you said, from a viewer perspective, even if we have X amount of more green flag passes in a race like this, you don't get that indication from a fan, because if you're watching this race, there's really nothing that really kind of jumped out to make you feel like, wow, like this package really fixed the racing, and our experiences is that much better as a result. It really didn't seem that way, like you said, and I certainly get that better indication. I'm someone that definitely wants to continue to see battles up front. Still want to see these guys work to pass, but especially in that practice session, we didn't get any encouraging signs from drivers behind the wheel that there was a big difference. Even the new tire that they brought, it really, didn't make any significant difference. So just coming into the weekend, leaving a little bit of a sour taste, like, oh boy, like here we go again. It's just going to be another boring, flat, short track that we've seen over the last couple of years. But I think it's more of a Phoenix issue than it is like a package issue. And I say that because I don't want to take anything away that Phoenix has brought. It's an incredible facility. They've built it up beautifully. They sold out now the last 6 years. So there is obviously a desire and a craving to get to Phoenix. It's back I want to get to see a race and just explore the facility, because it is top notch and they've done a phenomenal job of building that. However, if it translates to poor racing, there's really not much you could really do about that. So, like, obviously, this is a discussion that I'm sure will get brought up, later on in the season about, is Phoenix still worthy of being the championship race? I think that answer has kind of presented itself over the last couple of years. And even just the idea of having 2 dates at Phoenix. You look at a lot of these other short tracks that, you don't get 2 races anymore, like Richmond or, another one of those short tracks, and Phoenix still has it. Obviously, it sells out and it still has a lot of that, going for it. But racing itself, it is tough to pass just in general at this track. Even if guys are using the dog and fanning out 5-6 wide, that's obviously really cool. But I just think it's more of a Phoenix product rather than the short track. And we'll certainly learn more as we run more races with this package. If we get a lot of the same that what we saw at Phoenix, then obviously we need to put horsepower back in these cars, because you still have Denny Hamlin. There's a clip of Kyle Larson that's been going around. Full disclosure, haven't seen it, talking about 1,000 horsepower, all this, but these guys are saying that they could put 750 horsepower in the car tomorrow. And it basically wouldn't make a difference cost-wise. So that seems to be the easy fix. I don't understand why NASCAR is so reluctant to do this.
Yeah.
You have your drivers that are advocating for it. And of all the changes, of all the risks that you've taken to try and fix the racing, why do you think, Zach, that there is such a reluctance of doing this? Because this is a sport that is willing to take chances, and they're willing to try and fix it. They're willing to try and move the needle. When it comes to horsepower, they shut up. I don't know why that's happening. What's your read on just why they're refusing to put horsepower in these cars?
It is really tough because I feel like years ago, like under the Brian France rule and like during that era, them shutting down like any conversation, any driver ideas or any fan feedback or anything, that wouldn't really surprise me. But these last 3, 4, 5 years, I feel like just everything is on the table, with schedule changes and car changes with that and the fan experience at the track and just, whatever it is. I feel like just everything is a possibility. And they've been in a position now for a long time with Steve Phelps and everybody that they're willing to experiment. I think that's been the biggest word that's gone around for a while now is we're going to try this out. The market is there. The fans are there. We've seen what you've had to say. The drivers are thinking this. So we're going to go for it. And if I think Phelps said that about the Dodger Stadium and that whole idea that's going around for potentially next year, Southern California. He literally said like, oh, if we're going to try it and if it works, great. If it doesn't, then, well, now we know, paraphrasing something like that. And that, to me, that's been the attitude. And I think that attitude can be positive. It can be negative. I love when we try stuff. I remember being a young fan and we had the same schedule every single year. There was never any changes. We went to tracks that I didn't like, and it was always race 4 of the season, race 6, race 15, the playoffs, the chase at the time, always had the same races, Texas, Phoenix, Homestead, the end of the year. And so I like that it's evolving and changing. But with something like this, I kind of share that same mentality of kind of bewilderment, like why we're not seeing any nudging, or we see nudging, we're not seeing them budge, we're not seeing them move with this situation. And I love Denny's perspective because he can speak not just as a driver, but also somebody who's paying the bills for very competitive cars. So he can go and tell you, like, this can be done tomorrow morning. We can have a test with this type of engine, and it would be very quick and very inexpensive for I'm assuming any race team. And they know it as well as anybody because they're driving the car, right? So they have that seat of the pants feel. They know if they just had this, they can make it happen on that guy. So I don't know why the sport as a whole isn't welcoming or at least open-minded to experimenting with that. They're looking at it more from an aerodynamic perspective and kind of with the tires, though the fall off wasn't there also on Sunday. So they're not going as aggressively in that department. And that's a whole other conversation with tires, right? Because we don't want, what happened at Bristol a couple of years ago, or Texas, or even Indy back in 08. Like, we're still living from those traumas of having races where just we couldn't go through a green flag run because every 20, 40, 60 laps, a tire would go down and it ruins somebody's race and completely changes the flow of what would have happened if they had a proper tire. So they're moving everything, but with engines and the horsepower, they seem to be stuck in their ways, and I don't really have an answer for it.
Yeah, it's strange. And you got guys that are behind the wheel that they should be the ones that you should be listening to more than anybody, because they know how it feels. And let's be real, they're certainly the smartest ones when it comes to those changes and what they might need. And they're going to continue to be outspoken. It's just, it's strange that they will not budge whatsoever on that topic. So I guess we'll see what happens, but we'll get more of an indication on where this type of racing is, especially with COTA this weekend. And then, of course, just the slew of short tracks we're going to be going to after. But in keeping with Phoenix here real quick, you mentioned Toyota and just the dominance. 5 5 drivers. Yeah, 5 drivers that led over 50 laps, or at least 50 laps, all Toyotas. I mean, you look at this, Zach, as a whole, they led 298 of 312 laps in this race. 2022 to 2023, 15 of 1,253 laps that Toyota led at Phoenix in the Gen 7. But that is ridiculous, man. Wow. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, do you chalk that up to the package, or I don't know what? I mean, the whole talk this season, the whole talk this year has been Chevy, right? They won at least the majority of the races coming in, and then the first short track, they completely crapped the bed, and Toyota literally leads the entire race. It was insane.
I mean, it's more of the car, in my opinion, because we talk about, again, the dominance that Chevy brought, but Cliff Daniels, even after Vegas, kind of foreshadowed a little bit and even mentioned that maybe the gap between Toyota and us, and even Ford for that matter, is a lot closer than we initially thought, because how close Tyler Reddick was able to at least keep it with Kyle Larson, even Larson to dominate that race, and then coming into Phoenix, sweeping the front row, sweeping the stages. You got 5 guys that you lead almost the entire friggin' race, and Christopher Bell, watching him slice and dice his way through the field. And then, I know you say it wasn't dominated, but that third stage and just totally, absolutely got blown away. I really wish that Truex would have not pit so early. He would have tried to at least let that strategy run out a little bit farther to make it a little bit interesting. And as soon as he did, would have been close. Yeah. It was
Bell
a foregone conclusion.
Bell really wasn't closing in on him like I expected. It was a little early in that run, but it was like 10, 15, even more laps than that. And I was kind of watching the margin. It wasn't really changing a whole lot. That just speaks to the tire wear and all that. But Truex had a really, really good car as well, a Toyota again. So I think Bell may have been in a little trouble there, but Truex didn't have an option.
Yeah, it would have been fun watching him. Yeah, for sure. It would have been fun to watch him deke it out a little bit more, though. But Bell, margin of victory. This is the largest margin of victory in the next gen era. This from reporter Steven Stumpf. The margin of victory, 5.465 seconds. The previous high, New Hampshire 2022, also done by Christopher Bell, 5.439. Yeah, Christopher Bell on these short, flat tracks, man. You better watch out. Because he carries that quiet confidence. He feels disrespected that his name is not in the typical conversation with the Byrons, the Larsons, the Dennys of the world, but he deserves to be. He deserves to be. He doesn't talk much. He lets the results on the track do the work, and he comes in and, puts on a show. So, understanding the dominance that Toyota put together here at Phoenix. And I know, again, it's a small sample. It's one race. But again, this is where the championship race is going to be held. So is it fair to say that Toyota is the clear title favorite after Phoenix? Because, I mean, you look here. Ross Chastain comes home 6th for Chevrolet. He's the only Chevy to finish in the top 10. Next best guy is Suarez in 13th, and then you have Kyle Larson in 14th, and every other Hendrick Chevy, Byron 18th, Chase 19th, Bowman 20th. I mean, just not what you want to see coming out of Chevy. Ford, huge bounce back RFK. We know that they really have succeeded on these more low downforce style racetracks. Ryan Blaney continues to just be extremely consistent. Michael McDowell, shout out, very solid top 10. Chase Briscoe hung around, the back end top 10, sometimes in the top 12 for the majority of the day. But I mean, Toyota has to be the clear favorite now. I feel like if it's only gonna increase for them. I feel like to understand what they did here, like the sky's the limit for them to just absolutely rake on these types of tracks and then some, because they're only going to continue to get more comfortable with this car, and it's only going to translate into better results. So to see what we saw at Phoenix, it's only going to get better. They have the potential to get a lot of these cars in the postseason as a result. So if you're Toyota, you got to be smiling ear to ear with what you saw. But I feel like they have to be the obvious choice to take home the championship if they are able to get enough guys in there when it's all said and done, right?
Yeah, well, you said it there, and I agree. Like at this point in the season, it's all about like baseline, like where is everybody starting the season from? Because as we know from basically every season in the history of the sport, like the guys who are quick in the beginning of the year, by the summertime, they're not running up front anymore. Like there are years where Joe Gibbs, would start the year terribly, and all the headlines are about what happened to JGR, where are they? And then when the playoffs start, they're all of a sudden, advancing through the round of 16, round of 12, round of 8, and you're like, oh crap, they could win another title. So I feel like that happens enough to where I try looking at the opening 2 months or so, through the spring as basically as like a starting point. And you don't want to become complacent. You want to always be evolving on your stuff because they're going to get better, but so is every other team, and every team isn't going to be tinkering with the same toys that you're tinkering with. So I think if they're evolving on their stuff, you can't be just looking ahead and just doing the same thing every week, because as you said, that's going to be old news by the end of this month, because all we're doing is this same package on different types of tracks, but they're mostly all short tracks. And I don't know if it's as clear, like looking at it from the perspective of this is just a baseline where we're starting. It's tough for me to say that, oh, they're the title favorite, they're the playoff favorite, because I just feel things evolve so much, kind of waves kind of coming back and forth with certain teams, certain drivers. And I know that they look tremendously well now. Even when Chevy won those opening 3 races, they really weren't. Even Larson, that wasn't quite the runaway that we statistically look at it, because as you mentioned, Reddick was on him on stage 1 finish, stage 2, and then the race finish. It was like the same exact gap. And each one he was closing in on him, and it was more about the aero game and what lanes to choose. But if they were both in clean air, I just feel like the 45 had the stronger car. It's just sometimes it's just about circumstance, and they look great right now overall, Toyota, because it was so consistent across many cars. 5 of them led the entire race outside of Todd Gilliland, and he stayed out. That's just what Front Row Motorsports does. They always stay out and stretch their fuel, stretch their tires to lead laps, and just hope for a caution. Sometimes it works, usually it doesn't, but that's just their MO. That's what they've done for years. Outside of that, they led the whole race. So I think looking at it from there, that's really, really tough to do. Larson, led most of Vegas, and Atlanta, Daytona, just a different animal. And that's I feel like that's where Ford kind of showed their strength, not only qualifying, but then also during the races. But super speedway that's not where you would prefer to be your best, because how quickly that can be taken from you. If you're really good on a short track, like it's tough to get ahead of you. If you're great on 1.5 miles, that is a tremendous strength that'll lead you throughout most of the season, and short track pace, especially that can translate to road courses, that can translate to some of the flat tracks that we have. Like it's really beneficial. So that's where I do kind of see where you're going with Toyota and Gibbs, especially because if you show these type of strengths, that there's many more areas where you can build off those strengths, other than just a super speedway where we only get a few of those a year, and the last lap you can finish 30th. You can lead the whole race, and then you're just in the wrong line and you lose the race. The other types of tracks, they aren't quite that way.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting, but big statement for Toyota in Phoenix. They were scorching hot in the desert for sure. So really impressive stuff. Bristol, different beast, not running this package, running the intermediate package, and we're on the concrete for the first time in quite a while, which I am really looking forward to. I was not a fan of the dirt race at all, if I'm being honest. Again, it's just one of the, and again, props to NASCAR for trying to be different and trying to add some variety. You know what I mean? But it was always, I was always against it because I feel like, yes, maybe the racing at Bristol hasn't been great over the last couple of years, but it's still a marquee event. It's still one of the most well-known tracks that we go to that I feel like the average fan can at least understand and pick out. And it's the last great Coliseum, So I'm excited to see what these guys can do on the concrete again. Hopefully the weather is decent and we're not running this race on a Monday or a Tuesday. I'm not entirely sure what the forecast is looking like, but if there's anything if there's any trend we have become used to, it's that Bristol weather in March is absolutely terrible.
The worst.
So
the whole year.
The absolute
Number
worst.
one.
The absolute worst. Yeah. Just really unfortunate stuff. But Zach, before we put Phoenix in the rear view entirely and actually look ahead to Bristol, I want to touch on a bit of news that actually really rocked your world this morning. And, is near and dear for us, both at NBC Sports. But a little bit of shakeup in the booth. Obviously, we know that Dale Jr. is not going to be in the booth this year, and he's going over to Amazon and Warner Brothers in 2025. But an interesting move being done where post-Olympic break, Lee Diffey will serve as the play-by-play guy. Not entirely sure for the amount of races, and I believe this is still just a report, hasn't been confirmed just yet. But I know that you have some thoughts about this, Zach. So I'll kind of let you take the floor here. What are your thoughts here on Lee Diffey getting another shot with stock car racing?
It's Christmas in March. I can't believe it. It literally.
I'm so giddy about this, man.
I was, dude. Literally, I mean, NBC came back to NASCAR in 2015, and I think at that point we're looking at who they chose to be in the booth, and I liked quite a few of them. You had Jeff, Steve, and then Rick Allen leading, and I just, it didn't really hit me personally with what Rick was bringing to the booth. I feel like there was some strengths there that I felt like could have been improved on, and just every year I tried to look for that improvement. But at the same time, you're watching IndyCar, and for Formula One for a little bit, Lee Diffey was just killing it, and I love the torque in his voice and just how he would sell a story. And he's a historian of basically every motorsport somehow. If you think of sports car racing, open wheels, two wheels, and even stock cars, like he really does pay attention to every motorsport, and then just worldwide sports with what he does with Olympics and particularly track and field. He just knows how to bring that audience, and he knows how to elevate a moment and make it feel like it's a big deal. Like, it can be a very minute thing. It can be one driver passing another. We saw it on Sunday in IndyCar. That wasn't the best race, but any moment, any pass that happened, he's like, oh, look at here. He's going up the inside. He's got the pass on him coming out of the turn 4. You're like, wow, you got me. What happened? That was for 17th
jacked up for a pass for 15th, man. I mean, Jesus.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think can benefit every single motorsport, because Lee doesn't tell you what is happening. He tells you why it's happening. So two guys will be racing for position really hard. And instead of just saying, I'm not saying, Rick did this every time, but he'll just go, oh, he's onto the back bumper to the inside, and he completes the pass. Now, like Lee would say, oh, his contract is up at the end of the year. He's on a 2-year winless streak. And I spoke to him on Friday, and he said, Lee, it's time for me to start making moves and being aggressive. And he is making those moves right now. The time is now. And all of a sudden, like, you don't know who these guys are, right? But now you know exactly why that guy is running hard and why he's making the moves that he's making, because, oh, he might be out of a job next year. Like, he spoke to him on Friday and he said, now's the time for me to get aggressive. So, and that just comes out of nowhere. That'll be the middle of the race, and he'll just spit out this huge, compelling story that makes you understand why something is happening. So, and he's done that in every motorsport, and he did a few cup races back in 2017, and I was hooked. I loved, hearing, just how he elevates the series overall. And this was great news. Rick is a great guy. He was in a documentary I did last year on the NASCAR IndyCar crossover. Great guy. He's got a great voice. And he's still doing the Xfinity series. But overall, I think this is tremendously huge for the sport. I think Lee's going to bring it to a new audience. He's going to captivate people who've maybe never been captivated by a NASCAR race, because he's got that genetic skill to bring people together who've like, anytime I watch the Olympics, I don't know a lot of these runners, but literally when they're on the starting grid, he's able to sell each guy, what country they're from, what school they went to, how much buildup they have, like this guy, he's the one who everyone's talking about. And that's something that not everybody has. So this was tremendous news. As you said, coming after the Olympics, not sure which race that would be, or if it's going to be throughout the entire season through the playoffs. We know IndyCar ends basically as the playoffs begin. So I feel like the schedule would be open a little bit there. But with Dale out, that was a loss. I think having Lee in there, NBC was like, we got somebody here who's able to bring that intensity and that enthusiasm and that professionalism and all of that. Just, there's nothing that's going to be lost. It's just going to be a lot of gains and something that NASCAR needs, because just one more point, I feel like most people watch NASCAR and they just feel like it's that stereotypical type of fan base, and it's just drivers kind of going around. Visually, it's not as compelling as an IndyCar or an F1, even though the competition and the statistics prove otherwise. Visually, it's just a different type of show. So to have someone like him to tell you why this is a big deal, why this is fascinating, that's going to be very beneficial. So great news. I cannot wait until after the Olympics and watch him soar.
Yeah, he's beaming over there. Really,
right?
And now, yeah. Hey, look, it is exciting, and I remember those couple of races that Lee. Was it 2017? Was it that long ago?
He did Michigan and Watkins Glen. I think it was just those two.
Yeah, and that's back before I even really kind of knew who Lee Diffie was. And you hear this accent, and you're like, "Who's this guy calling NASCAR races?" Right?
Right.
But he is a rock star, and like you said, versatile at virtually anything that he calls: motorsport, Olympics, and he does captivate those stories that you might not need to know, but it's like, here's why you should know, right? And I really love that point that you make, because when races do get strung out and when they do get tired and boring from a fan perspective, like, you need to be able to find those spots that can kind of inject that energy back into it, or try and, set something that really wouldn't get sold in like a normal race, but just from the complexion of it, you got to be able to really find those moments, because those moments are what's going to save a broadcast, right? And it just allows for a little bit more conversation and a little bit more intrigue. So definitely was surprised to hear that this was going to happen. But again, like you said, I think that it is a really good move that you really don't lose much. And again, to have the two voices of Rick and Lee there kind of split time, I think is going to be a positive move. And I certainly think that understanding Lee and what he does on the IndyCar side of things, and obviously the sports car side of things, he's going to continue to bring that to NASCAR. And I certainly think that, especially post Olympics, it really kind of reignites that, loss over those last couple of weeks for NASCAR, and bringing it into, of course, the playoffs. And obviously one of the more probably the most it is the most pressure cooker part of the season, pre-playoffs, and then getting to it. So, again, still reported, but nonetheless, I mean, it was reported by the Sports Business Journal, I saw. So I think we're just kind of waiting to get that information, but definitely an interesting move there to put him in.
Yeah. And I am curious how he is going to fit in with the other guys in the booth, right? Because I think a lot of what works with Lee is what works with Townsend Bell and James Hinchcliffe. They're very analytical people. incredibly smart. Of course, they raced for decades in open wheel racing, and Lee's able to kind of feed off of them and have his own personal perspective as just an overall sports professional. And I think going back to even to the Formula One booth when F1 was on NBC for a little bit, Steve Matchett, he worked in F1 as I believe a mechanic, and he was just tremendously analytical. He was able to go down every little technical innovation that happened, and that really worked well with the Lee. And then they had David Hobbs, who comes from a totally different era from back in the 60s and 70s. He ran with McLaren, and he ran the Indy 500 for a while. And to me, Jeff Burton's not that old, but he does come from a different type of era. The 90s and the early 2000s, he was killing it in Cup. And I think I sense that similar type of kind of back and forth with a Steve Letarte, who definitely brings that technical side, and then a Jeff who comes from that type of era behind the wheel. And then Lee, who I think, even though he hasn't done a lot of NASCAR, he understands the culture and how it stands out from every other motorsport on the planet, especially American motorsports. So I think those three will work really well together.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. We got some time before that, but
I hope it's official.
Exactly.
Don't want to get all excited over a report, but
we gotta wait. We gotta wait for the pen emoji, signed, sealed, and delivered.
Yes,
but yeah, it's all pointing in that direction. So should be exciting once we get there. But yeah, let's now look ahead to Bristol, Zach. We're going short track racing again, but I got to put you on the spot here first before we dive into some drivers here. Little bit of an interesting trivia question for you, which is going to focus on all-time race winners, but not the guy at the top, because Darrell Waltrip does have the most wins all-time at Bristol with 12. The next best is 9 wins, which has been accomplished by 3 different drivers. I need you to name those 3 drivers that have accomplished 9 wins at Bristol.
When you mentioned all-time wins, I'm like, Darrell, I know that one.
Darrell's too easy. Too easy. Can't give you that one.
You're learning too much. That's a trick. That's a great one.
We got 3 of them.
Yeah, that's surprising. It just shows you how some guys just nail it there. I know it's not Kyle Busch because I just looked him up. He's an 8-time winner, so it's not him. Though he is a good pick this weekend, so it might be 4 after Sunday.
Okay. All right.
I feel like none of them, 3 champions. I feel like none of them raced recently.
Correct. Definitely not.
Yeah, this is like going way back.
One of them has retired within, 2024? Within the last almost 20 years.
20 years.
Or I want to make sure I phrase that correctly. Retired within the last 20 years.
2004.
We're looking at like 2006 and beyond and prior.
Okay.
I think 06 was his last full-time season. Legends.
I mean, yeah, legends. I mean, I think of Richard Petty because he won basically every short track half a dozen times or more. Was Richard one of them?
It's not Petty, but it's someone in the same tier.
Okay. I would think of like a David Pearson, Cale Yarborough, Rusty Wallace. He was a great short tracker. Do you have what decades they won the most in?
I'll tell you, you named 2 of them. So
okay, your face wasn't reacting, so I wasn't sure if I got it.
Yeah, you named 2 of them. One, we're looking back in like the 70s, 80s for maybe one of these guys. But you named 2 of them.
Okay. So that was what? It was was Rusty one of them?
Rusty is one of them.
Rusty's one of
so
them.
He was the guy he was the guy over the last 20 years or beyond
beyond that.
Okay.
Oh man. What was Yarborough the other one?
Cale is the other one. And then
Okay, it's two.
there's one more who's another just obvious name.
Obvious name. Damn.
When I say same tier as Richard Petty,
I think David Pearson.
it's not Pearson.
Not Pearson. Earnhardt?
Yeah, it's Dale.
Really? He won 9. I didn't feel like he won 9 times there, but
Yeah, it's Dale.
okay.
It's Dale Earnhardt, Cale Yarborough, and Rusty Wallace. Kyle Busch is 8. That's crazy. Yeah. And Kurt, the Busch brothers just destroyed that place. 8 wins and 6 wins.
Yeah, they won 4 straight a few years ago. I think 2017 to 18, which is wild.
Yeah, Pearson has 5.
Okay.
Petty's got 3.
Wow. That's wild, huh?
Yeah, that's crazy, right? You just think about the dominance of Petty. He's got 3 at Bristol, but
like North Wilkesboro, Richmond, Darlington, but like he wasn't a big Bristol guy. Martinsville, but
yeah, but that's them. Dale Earnhardt, Rusty Wallace, Cale Yarborough, all with 9, but Darrell Waltrip probably untouched at 12. It's probably never gonna be broken. I believe it was 7 consecutive. Yeah. Unreal, dude.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. But that's a fun one. That's a fun one.
That was a good one.
3 guys at 9. Pretty impressive stuff. Good stack. Let's talk about Bristol this weekend, though. Food City 500 got the odds from DraftKings Sportsbook rolling on the bottom. I want to start here. And I want to get your take on these guys because RFK, I mentioned a huge bounce back at Phoenix. Top 5 finishes for both guys. I love both of these guys this weekend. They have a lot of momentum. I mean, you look at Chris Buescher to start, top 5 in 3 of the last 5 at Bristol. And again, we're not – we're counting – at least I am not counting any dirt stats when it comes to this. It's all concrete. All concrete. Throw dirt out the window. So on concrete, top 5 in 3 of the last 5 at Bristol. He won here in 2022. Keselowski, 3-time winner. They've both thrived on the high banks of Bristol in recent trips. And Keselowski, again, looking to break this now 102 race winless streak. In looking at this from a betting perspective, I wrote about this. Chris Buescher is a guy I'm not looking to bet at this present moment. Only because he's not qualified better than 20th in the last 4 Bristol races. So if you're looking to bet a guy like Chris Buescher, understanding that he has not qualified well, he's a guy I'm willing to wait on to see if the line shifts in our favor a little bit more because plus 1100 was a little shorter for my liking to just bet Chris Buescher straight up before practice and qualifying. So I think we might be able to get a little bit of a better price on Buescher if he unloads like crap. So we'll kind of see about that. Keselowski, I'm a little bit more inclined to take at plus 1,200. I mean, seeing what we saw from Phoenix, you have to believe they're going to be able to replicate that speed here at Bristol. And Keselowski, like I said, a 3-time winner, like he knows how to get it done here. I feel like his line's not going to particularly move much. I think Buescher's is more, has that chance to move a little bit. But RFK, I think you're looking at 2 drivers that can absolutely win this weekend. I'm certainly going to be looking at them, and I like both of them this weekend. It's just from a betting perspective, certainly more willing to wait on Buescher than I am Keselowski, just understanding the qualifying stats for the last couple of years in the next gen. But still, love what you got to see out of him at Phoenix, especially after just the disastrous start to the year. So certainly pointing things in the right direction. And I feel like RFK is going to continue to, kind of flex their muscles on these short tracks and see if they can come away with another win. Hopefully Keselowski this time around, it would be just awesome to see him finally get that win. But Chris Buescher is certainly going to be a threat as well after a runner-up finish at Phoenix.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people to look at. I've always categorized Bristol as its own animal amongst the short tracks, just from listening to drivers and just the overall racing that we see. It's an animal, and when you're there, you really sense it. Like they're just going around almost like a toilet bowl, just vroom, vroom, just around and around and around.
That vortex theory, man, we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, we might need, I don't know if we're going to need it, but I think if there's a track where that would work, I'm sure DW thought about it from Bristol, because it's just, you're on top of it, and once you're in the infield, it's all above you and you're looking up into the track and the grandstands that go up, and it's such a beautiful place. But there's a lot of guys to look at. I mean, you hit on RFK, who that's a team that I'm looking at a lot this year. They woke up last week. Maybe they didn't have the raw pace to finish, top 5, second for Busher. But half of this is getting that track position and having the right strategy. And we saw Truex didn't have it. Denny made a very critical error late, and he was basically done. And a lot of other guys, they weren't able to get out of that mid-pack kind of tornado, but they did. And going into Bristol could be very well timed, because you mentioned Bush's win, but back in 2022. But don't forget that Keselowski was dominating that race before his tire went down. He led over 100 laps, and it seemed like he was going to be the guy to win that one, and kind of got taken away. But they're looking really well. Even if you want to go, not really an easy pick. I mean, I saw Kyle Busch there plus 1,200. We mentioned he's an 8-time winner, but he has been on a little tough run of races at Bristol. His last 3 races have been 21st, 34th, and 20th. Definitely not what we would expect from him. Ironically, that's right when we went to dirt in the spring race. So for some reason, that voodoo is kind of dragged over to the fall race when it's on concrete. If you look at before the dirt was introduced, he had 6 top 5s in the 7 races before then, including 3 wins. But it's not really new. It's not new news to see him struggle at Bristol. In the mid 2010s, he had a really bad run of races here. From 2014 to 2017, he really didn't finish top 30. He finished 30th or worse, every single week besides one. Over a 6-race period, 3 years, he couldn't finish top 30. And then he went on that great run after that. So could this be the year that he kind of wakes up and gets that number 9 win and joins that illustrious list? I feel like it can happen. He's coming off a really bad weekend in Phoenix that he wants to forget. This whole start of the year for him has been basically all of 2023 shrunken into 4 races. He nearly won Atlanta. Give him 8 thousandths and he would have won. Daytona kind of is what it is, and then it's just been so hit or miss, every week this year. So I think Bristol can be a place where he can get back up front and stay there. Michael McDowell jumps up to me a little bit. He's plus 6,000.
I'm so glad you mentioned Michael McDowell this week.
Yeah, I mean, the whole team at front row, they've been getting a lot of press this year, and it's well deserved. And he's coming off, another really good run at Phoenix. But even all the great moments he had last year, he said in an interview that Bristol last year was basically his best race, his best performance, even more than the Indy Road Course that he annihilated and won, because short tracks have been tough for that organization throughout their entire history. And he finished 6th straight up in the August race last year, or the fall race last year. And he had a top 5 car most of that night. And for him to bring it home in a position like that meant a lot to him. And coming back to this race, the team has only improved these last few months, the last few months of last year. And then with the Penske Tier 1 status for this year, it's been noticeable. Vegas was tough, but outside of that, they've been bringing it. And Todd Gilliland finally got a decent run last week. He led those laps that Toyota didn't, but he got a top 20. And McDowell, it could be well timed to go into Bristol. And then you just look at a lot of the regulars, the Lawsons, Byron, Hamlin. They lead the average finish over these last 3 concrete races. 2 of them have won, Hamlin and Byron. I think Byron was somewhere in the middle in terms of odds, right? He wasn't one of the top guys So if you're looking for
Byron's interesting because I've been back and forth on him this weekend. He's 1100. He's 11-1 plus 1100.
okay.
I don't know how much of an overreaction there is going to be coming out of Phoenix with just how out to lunch Chevrolet was the entire race. Again, it's a different package running in Bristol. It's the intermediate package, but it's still a short track. I don't want to overlook Byron. Kyle Larson at plus 50, way too short to pay. Not a driver I'm looking to bet. And honestly, like all three of those guys, Larson at plus 450, Hamlin at plus 500, Bell at plus 550, and then Byron at 11-1. Like, because you have these top three drivers that are priced short, it's just presenting so much more value for a lot of these other drivers, whereas like a Byron really could probably be like a plus 700, plus 800 driver, knowing just how good of a driver he is on a week-to-week basis. Even for a guy like Ryan Blaney, to see him at plus 1100, where he's typically in that plus 600 to plus 800 range when it's all going right for him. So it's given us opportunity. I mean, Byron, I just don't want to overlook. I know he finished 9th last year, and then he's got a pair of top three prior to that. So he can get it done. It's just how much of an overreaction is there going to be from what Chevrolet brought to Phoenix? And is that really going to translate over to Bristol? I think that's just the one thing that concerns me, because I do think that there needs to be something taken into account there. But 11-1 for Byron is certainly something that I wouldn't overlook, and you expect that he's gonna be a top 10 car, a top 5 car. It's just the statement that Toyota made and what they could do going into Bristol this weekend, is certainly on a lot of people's minds. And I think that it's going to be on display once again. I mean, I think Toyota is going to be the team to beat this weekend once again, which leads me to then talk about a guy that I feel like we have really yet to talk about, but Tyrone Gibbs. Bro, Ty Gibbs, there's probably no driver more dialed in to start the season than Ty Gibbs has been. And he's knocking on the door of that first career Cup Series win. I mean, he's got 3 straight top 10 finishes entering the weekend. He has the best average finish in the entire series through 4 races. He was awesome at Phoenix last week, and he finished 5th at Bristol in the fall of last year. Had a running position of 4.4. If he qualifies well, I mean, he's going to be a legit contender. 13-1, again, plus 1,300. A little short, I think, at this point in time. I don't know how much midweek action Ty Gibbs is going to get that really hammers this number shorter. So it's prop flux around the plus 1,300. Maybe you get something at like a plus 1,500 if it moves at all in our favor. But Ty Gibbs deserves to be looked at, and he deserves to be in the conversation as a legit contender for win weekend. One thing about Michael McDowell, love Michael McDowell this year. I mean, what he did at Phoenix, I wrote about his top 10 number. He cashed it. I think he is going to do that again. I think he has a great chance to do it again this weekend. Shout out to DraftKings for the offerings that they have included throughout the first month of the season. We now have top manufacturer props. We have top 10 odds on a consistent basis. So just shout out to DraftKings for really getting with it. Start the year. It's one of the more accessible books for most people. So, that's certainly great to see that we're getting a lot of these offerings. I want to look in particular at the top Ford market for Michael McDowell at plus 1,500. I think it's a great bet because he finished 6th here last fall, had an average. He was a top 5 car all day, had an average running position of 5.8. So Michael McDowell was there, and the only driver that beat him was Chris Buescher. And I think the RFK guys are going to be the drivers that really, put you at risk first. But at plus 1,500, I think it's really worth a bet for Michael McDowell, who has shown early this year, excluding Las Vegas, this team. I mean, they have done a complete 180 with this tier 1 alliance with Ford and Team Penske. And they've really kind of put the field on notice that they are going to contend. You're going to see that 38 car in the top half of the field on more occasions than not. Right. So I really like that. I think his top 10 price, where is it at? I'm just looking right now. It's probably in like the plus 250 range, if I had to guess. It's plus 240. I think that's a really good number for McDowell. He's proven he can do it. And this car has been a top 10 car on most race weekends to start the year. So I love the McDowell call out. One other guy that I'm certainly looking at and really trying to give the respect to is Noah Gragson, man.
Sure. Yeah.
What a start to the season. Probably one of the pleasant surprises to begin the year. I mean, 2 top 10s in the first 4 races. He narrowly missed out at Phoenix last weekend. He's a 2-time Bristol winner in the Xfinity Series. His confidence has to be as high as ever in the Cup Series. So if he continues to bring this level of consistency to Bristol, I mean, we really need to start looking at this number 10, because if it weren't for that 35-point penalty, this number 10 car would be 15th in the standing now. So
that's right.
Got to give some respect to Noah Gragson, especially understanding that coming into the year, again, with all the struggle with Stewart-Haas Racing, he was probably on the, when you're looking at Briscoe, Priest, Berry, he was probably in like that third amongst drivers. Like he's almost pacing Stewart-Haas Racing right now. Give some respect to Chase Briscoe. He's been consistent, but shout out Gragson. He's plus 240 to finish top 10 at Bristol on DraftKings. It's another number I really like, because he's been a borderline top 10 car on most of these weekends, and I think he can certainly continue to show some of that speed. What's your read on Erik Jones this weekend? Because again, keep the theme of Toyota. Jones was phenomenal.
He was great
at Bristol when he was running for Gibbs. I mean, in even Furniture Row, when he pulled it and dominated that race years ago, but ultimately came home second. I think Erik Jones is certainly a guy this weekend. He's plus 4,000 currently on DraftKings. And look, this team, the short run speed that Toyota has, I mean, it was all on display at Phoenix. I mean, Jones qualified 4th, and if he qualifies 4th, this price is not going to be available. So I'm keeping my eye on that number 43. I don't know if he's going to win, but I certainly think that if we get carnage at Bristol, he's a guy that could certainly potentially be there at the end and put together a really decent finish. But he had, 4 top 5 and 8 starts with Gibbs, running for Toyota. What is your read on Erik Jones this weekend?
My read is quite high, not just because of his past at Bristol, but also how he ran at Phoenix. Like he qualified tremendously well. He was running well, kind of battling for the lead at one point early, got up in the second, and the race just didn't quite play out for him. And on one of those late restarts, he was mad at Briscoe, but I feel like, Bubba was the one who kind of put his nose in there, and they made contact and he hit the wall and he was done. But what he would have accomplished if he was able to stay in that cleaner air up front, he just would have been one of those Toyotas. He would have easily gotten a top 5, I feel, if they kept up with the adjustments throughout the afternoon. But going into Bristol, that's a really good place for him, and he has the experience to tackle that place, and he knows what the car needs to go fast. He proved that literally his rookie year, with Furniture Row and that one-time car that they ran specifically for him that season. That really built what we know from him. He was great in Xfinity on all short tracks, but on the Cup side, that's really how he made his name, was in that race. So I know he doesn't forget that. Anytime I think of Bristol, he's a guy who comes up in my head. So I think, highly of him. I think he can do great things. John Hunter Nemechek, I know Phoenix wasn't what we expected, after practice and just how his teammate was running. But I would see what he can do. I definitely feel less optimistic on what he can achieve. But I know the pieces are there for him to have a really solid day. I'm sure he's kind of lower on the on the pole there. But one more guy that I'm looking at is Carson Hocevar. We mentioned this rookie year battle, and I saw Barry just kind of running away with it. But back-to-back top 15s, 3 straight top 20s since the horrible Daytona where he had nothing to do with anything. Just got caught up in a mess on basically the start. A great Phoenix in this car. He's proven that he can have an issue and come back and basically not have any issues in doing so. And Bristol, he had a great run with Legacy Motor Club last year, finished 11th. We mentioned Erik Jones, what he did. Different eras, different times, different achievements, but that race put him on my notice, that he can run top 10 in a car that had no business running top 10 last year. He was not running full time and had multiple drivers. It was a playoff race with a lot on the line, high drama, and he was just running right there. And he just missed the top 10 right at the end. But for him to prove that he can do that during a season last year that was really difficult on him in the truck series in terms of how people look at him as an athlete and as a race car driver mentally, for him to show the temperament and just the overall skill set, the racecraft to have a top 10 run in a cup car, with having next to no experience, that was really impressive. And now he's got a full-time ride. He's got these great runs. Sunday can be a good day for him. If he has, really high odds against getting a top 10, I would totally go for that.
Yeah, well, that's what I love. Carson Hocevar again this weekend for all the reasons you mentioned. His top 10 number is plus 275. It's another one that I'm on because I obviously came into the season high on Carson Hocevar. We continue to see a lot of improvement from Spire, and like you mentioned, just missing out on the top 10 last year at Bristol. He's still looking for his first this year, but I think it's a great opportunity for him to do so. He's consistent. He's been finishing these races, and he's been avoiding trouble. So I like him as a potential top 5 car. I think at almost 3-1 odds, it's really good for Carson. So I hope to see just him continue to carry and make gains. And again, like we talk about equipment that you're in, but when you have as much raw talent as a guy that Carson Hocevar does, like that means just as much as the equipment that you're in. And that's honestly going to elevate the equipment that you're in. So we've been able to see it from Hocevar. I like him as a top 10 car this weekend, and I think that it's valued at almost 3-1 if you're interested in the betting perspective. One other guy that I'll just kind of wrap and put a bow on this, Ryan Preece, just getting absolutely disrespected in this race. His odds are 200-1. He is behind guys like AJ Allmendinger. You can see right there, AJ Allmendinger, John Hunter Nemechek, Corey LaJoie. Ryan Preece is there at 200-1. For him to finish in the top 10 is plus 600. That's ludicrous, in my opinion. Yeah, dude. Like, we got to understand that, yes, Ryan Preece does not light it up by any means. You know what I mean? Like, but when it comes to short tracks, he is one of the best short track racers in the Cup Series. His experience, growing up, just everything that he did. A 6-1 price for Ryan Preece is just crazy to me. Like, absolutely crazy. Certainly one I'm not overlooking. And at plus 600, I mean, for a Stewart-Haas Racing Ford, Ryan Preece, I mean, give me a break. That seems like it's ridiculous to me. So I saw that, and I wasn't going to write about it, but I did because I was like, no shot. 6-1 for a top 10 is extremely long. And again, he's not going to win the race. But when you get a guy that's obviously mispriced like this, you look at spots here, and at 6-1, I think is advantageous for a top 10. So definitely another one that I'm on. I love the top 10 numbers this week for a lot of guys. And again, you're just getting much more favorable odds with such a jacked up top 3. So certainly a lot to work with.
Yeah, a lot to work with. I know one more name that I had was Chase Elliott. We mentioned the Hendrick struggles last week, but he was kind of the bright spot. He had definitely his best run of this season and his best run in quite a while, I feel. Top top 5 speed, qualified tremendously well. I think it tied his best qualifying effort since his comeback from his leg injury, at least on a non-super speedway. And he had a great run going. He just wasn't able to stay where he should have been, and he ended up outside the top 10. But he's had great success, great speed at Bristol. He's got one of the better average finishes there over these last 3 races on the concrete. So I feel like he's a decent. I think he's plus 2,000, which is a bit behind 2 of his teammates. Bowman's he should be a little lower, but I would keep an eye on Elliott just because of what he showed at Phoenix with his package to start.
Yeah, Chase is certainly interesting. The other driver, when you talk about Toyotas that I'm personally fading, is Martin Truex Jr. I really think that there's something to be said about tracks that just have your number. Bristol has had Martin Truex's number his entire career, even despite how consistently good that 19 has been to start the year. It has just been brutal for him in looking at his results at Bristol. I mean, finished 19th in this race last year, had a steering issue in 2022, finishes 36th, and then 7th, 24th, 10th, 20th. I mean, you're barely looking at top 10 finishes for him, even if he does qualify extremely well. It's just there's something about this track that Truex has not been able to figure out. So another driver priced at plus 2,000, which, look, if you're a serious believer in what have you done for me lately, it could present a good opportunity. I certainly carry that, but just history tells us that Martin Truex Jr. cannot get it done at Bristol. So maybe he turns the tide, but I'm not particularly interested. Just understanding that I really do think, there are just some tracks that guys can't figure out, and Truex has not been able to do that. And the results they're not good. Again, they're just not good. He's not even getting top 10s. He's barely getting some top teens here. So avoiding Truex. But again, profiles to be a really, really good weekend for Toyota. Really like RFK again in the position that they put themselves in to put together some good finishes again. But as far as who's going to be parking it in victory lane, Zach, who do you think that's going to be?
Brad Keselowski.
All right, I'm manifesting it.
Great.
I will manifest that and have it. Please manifest it. I'll be on it.
Yes, and that's my head talking. That's my heart talking. I think it wouldn't be a shocker if he wins, and it would be a great story as well, and a tremendous victory lane celebration. And it may even be another 1-2 this time, him being number 1. So I think statistically, everything, it's a good pick.
Yeah, that would be sweet to get a RFK 1-2 with Keselowski in victory lane. That would just be that would be the storybook win that we need for him.
He would finally be. Yes, yeah. And he's always so happy with a 1-2, but this time I don't think he'll be any happier. Hopefully Jack Roush is there in person, but we'll finally see Brad just be 100% happy for the first time since joining this organization.
Yeah, true company man there. It's not going to happen, but it would be so friggin' hilarious if Keselowski does win and we get a 2012 championship interview with Bill at post race like that. I mean, come on, dude, that deserves this winless streak. Like Keselowski, we've been asking and waiting for it for years. Now more than ever, can we bring back the boot? Come on,
right.
I know you might not be sponsored by Miller Lite. Put whatever you want, the hell you want in there. Bring back the boot. We need it.
Right.
One of the best interviews that I've ever seen. That was really fun. Really funny. That would be just so great.
I don't think he had kids at the time. He was probably our age, like 28.
Got responsibility. He's a team owner now, so maybe we're asking for a little bit too much.
Right.
But
that's not what I meant by. Yeah, that's not what I meant by going all out there for victory. But I love the thought. I would love to see that. But I wouldn't bet on. If that's a betting, that would be like plus 8,000, plus 50,000. Way up.
Yeah, that's up there. I like it. I'll manifest a Keselowski win. I'm going to roll with the youngster and just ride momentum with Ty Gibbs. I think he gets his first career win this weekend. Think it's a good pick. Would like to see a little bit of a better number. 13-1 is is a bet I like. And I think Ty Gibbs is going to be really good. So we'll see what happens. Bristol's going to be fun. Excited to run on the concrete. Get a nice little normal race in here. But good conversation as always, Zach. A lot of good stuff on the package, on Phoenix. And certainly, a number of drivers that I think we definitely see eye to eye on entering this weekend that can maybe shock us a little bit and continue to just, point their way into some consistency as now we really enter, the thick of the season. So should be a lot of fun. 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox on Sunday. Truck Series Saturday night at 8 o'clock. Xfinity is off this weekend, so we'll get a nice little 1-2 with Trucks and Cup. And then a whole lot of other racing this weekend, especially on the NBC umbrella.
Yeah.
Big weekend for sports car racing with the 12 hours of Sebring. I think virtually every series is running this weekend. So that will be a big event. Cars off this weekend, but Supercross round 10 in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium should be a lot of fun as well. Hayden Deegan is making headlines every which way. Jet Lawrence continuing to make headlines in a positive way. Deegan's not really making many positive headlines these days, but he's certainly stirring the pot, and conversation is being had. So that's all great. But Zach, what do you got on this weekend? What can the people expect from you?
So on the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel, I'm taking a week off when it comes to the Cup Series extended highlights. You mentioned IMSA with the 12 hours of Sebring, and then I think there's two other series, the Lamborghini series, and I think VP as well. So going to be handling all of those. Actually starts Thursday tomorrow, and then runs all the way through Saturday, Sunday. So going to be busy with all that. We also have a very cool Ever Wonder feature coming out. Should be today. Today's Wednesday. If you've ever wondered what happens during a NASCAR pit stop, Steve Letart's going to tell you. And I worked tremendously hard on that for the last month or so. So hope you guys enjoy that.
Yeah, I believe it is out by the time of this podcast. And I love the fact we're bringing back those Ever Wonder style hits.
Yeah.
Think it's going to be great, especially again for people that are just getting into the sport, to just learn more of the intricacies of what actually goes on and how it, affects outcomes of the race, in-race strategy, and all that good stuff. Because NASCAR pit stop, certainly, even with the changes they've made to the tire and things like that, they're still incredibly exciting and obviously play a serious factor in determining the outcome of these races. So yeah, that's really great stuff. It's a really great piece. So definitely check that out on NBCsports.com and Motorsports on NBC. For myself, you can always follow me on Twitter at MV Bachmann, talking NASCAR, Xfinity, and of course, I haven't been ranting about my Steelers. I've actually been extremely encouraged with the offseason that they've put together. So actually got some nice things to say about the black and gold, but I do talk a lot about Steelers. I love them near and dear to my heart, and football season just never really dies, I feel like. So always going to be talking about them. Being that Xfinity is off this weekend, I do not believe I'm going to be putting out a betting preview with the NASCAR betting preview show. But we can expect that to be back next week for COTA. But yeah, all good stuff. Excited for Bristol.
Yeah.
Should be a good time. So Zach, if nothing else, what do you say we tear down, we wrap things up here?
Yes, sir. Let's go. I love
all
Bristol.
Right,
it's one of my favorite places. I'm going to be watching this one with both eyes open.
That's right. Yeah. Should be a lot of fun. Go Brad Keselowski.
Yes,
go
sir.
Ty Gibbs. Let's get one of these guys in victory lane. But yeah, let's hope for a good race and some more exciting stuff to talk about next week, because we'll be back doing that for you guys next week. So check us out on YouTube, check us out on Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. And we will see you next week for the race. Have a nice weekend. And Zach, great talking to you. Great stuff. I'll talk to you soon.